Welcome to the House of Hoosier podcast. I'm your host, AJ Guyton. I'm here with my main man, Austin Render. And Austin's lots going on, man. Since we last spoke on our podcast, where do we start? Where do we start?
The season's over. I guess that's the first one. And we'll talk about the NCAA tournament. I think we have to go recency bias though and talk about the news that literally broke here. You and I were getting ready to record, and big story broke that Dane Fife is not returning as an assistant coach for the Hoosiers. And I think you and I were both ready to just have a nice conversation about a good season for the Hoosiers and where they're going next. And all of a sudden, I get an email that it says Wooden announces plans for coaching staff change. And I'm like, what? Is somebody stepping down? Did somebody get hired somewhere else? And no, this is the verbiage from Mike Woodson, quote, "I am committed to doing what I believe is best for the continued growth of our men's basketball program as we collectively work toward returning it to an upper echelon of college basketball. Sometimes that commitment can result in some very difficult decisions, and that is the case today. Ultimately, I believe that the fit must be right with the coaching staff, and I've decided that a change is necessary. I appreciate everything Dane has done as a member of the staff during the last year and as a player for our program. He will always be a part of the Hoosier family, and I wish him well in his future pursuits." AJ, you read that, you hear that. What comes to mind here as the Hoosiers say goodbye to Dane Fife?
Man, immediately the language is straightforward, man. And it's one thing that I've learned about Mike Woodson as I'm watching his coaching journey is that he's very clear with what he's saying. And what he's saying is we didn't get along. And at the end of the day, I don't know what the reason was for not getting along, but we had to make a sacrifice here, and it wasn't going to be me. That's basically what I heard from Mike Woodson. And I'll be honest, I got a couple inboxes about this very topic, 2 or 3 months ago. People reaching out asking me, did I hear that Fife was unhappy? And I'm glad I didn't respond to those inboxes, but because I was hoping that it wasn't true. But I noticed that Dane wasn't, as active tweeting, wasn't active on Twitter, talking as much as he was earlier in the year. And I just kind of watched from afar, and I just waited to either hear from him or, hear from him socially. And it turned out to be true. And it's unfortunate because now instead of talking about what we got to do next year, everybody's going to be trying to dig and figure out what happened between those two and understanding that the Hoosier family, the alumni family is still kind of fractured in a sense. So it takes the attention away from what those kids did, getting into the NCAA tournament, having some good points in the season, getting better, and us waiting to see what was next with them. And now we have to deal with this kind of in-house personal issue and try to figure out what happened.
This is what he's done in his first year. Mike Woodson is a no-nonsense coach. And I'm not saying that Dane Fife was nonsense by any means, but when something comes up, he, like you said, is straight to the point. We didn't fit together. I mean, that's what the statement says. There wasn't a fit. And he was quick to make the decision before the Northwestern game. These players are not going to play today because they aren't living up to my standards. And I think that was a lot of people respected Mike Woodson for that decision. Now he stands here and he comes to all of us and says, we're not fitting together. We have to move on from Coach Fife. And maybe in the long run, we will respect this decision. I think just you hear it, you see it come across, your immediate reaction is, whoa. I mean, nobody saw this coming. You said it, we've heard rumblings, but it wasn't something that you didn't think they could work out. I mean, Dane Fife is a Hoosier. He played on a national championship runner-up team. He comes back to his alma mater, moves his family to Bloomington, and this just is a little bit unexpected. But now there's a hole in the coaching staff, and it's a pretty big hole that Mike has to go out and fill now, and you wonder where he might be searching here to try and find a new assistant coach.
Right, and I hope when he finds a coach that you're looking for a coach that can replace the experience and the wherewithal to know the city of Bloomington like Dane Fife did, man. And it's unfortunate to have to be in this position right now. And honestly, I didn't talk to Dane enough to know what his particular role was on the team, but hopefully, I'm looking at the team. We can find someone who has a mind for offense and who can also help, develop kids when it comes to shooting the basketball, who can help those kids can improve, day in and day out. But, I have no idea what he's looking for. I'm still trying to process, how do you, find it enough guts to get rid of one of your family members. That has to be a difficult move, and it doesn't bode well for where Indiana is trying to go. It is not a good sign. And if I heard, it's just something that I'm still startled by and waiting till I get all the information to make my final synopsis of the situation. But it's very unfortunate.
So what I'm getting from you is this concerns you a little bit more than it's okay, Coach Woodson's taking control. He wants this program going in his right direction. This has more concern for you than optimism as to this will help the team going forward.
Absolutely, because one thing that I always looked at Indiana, one of the things I worried about Indiana was there was no Duke situation where there's a longtime coach looking to groom another coach and make sure that coach can carry on the traditions and their own way of the university. And that's where I was hoping they were going with this. And knowing Fife, and you talk to Fife, everybody knows his personality. They know what type of person he is, XYZ. So hiring him, you had to know that this is the type of person he is. He's opinionated. He's going to say how he feels. He's going to wear it on his face. He's going to wear it on his chest. But he's a competitor, and at the end of the day, he wants to win. And he probably has his own views on a lot of different things. But he has earned that respect because he's been in the game longer than Woodson has when it comes to college basketball, 20 plus years. So to see that happen and see those two guys ultimately clash, no, I'm not optimistic about anything at this point when it comes to where our kids are headed. You have to attribute maybe how did that affect the players during the season? Was that an issue? This type of thing, recruiting wise, XYZ. So it's bigger than I think people are giving it credit for, and it concerns me because I've said multiple times on this show, like the Indiana men's basketball fraternity has been fractured over the years. And so I was hoping something like this podcast, talking to each and every one of these guys, can help bring us together, but it's almost like we took 2 steps backwards. So I'm definitely concerned.
Yeah, and it's not like this is a guy that has had this type of thing in the past. I know we know as a player, Dane was a feisty guy, would ruffle some feathers, but he spent a very long time with Tom Izzo. Yeah. And there wasn't, there weren't reports of anything there between those two. And he comes to Indiana and immediately just doesn't work with Mike Woodson. So I'm with you. It is a little concerning. We're going to have to, this is a podcast being recorded the night that this news comes out. We're going to have to come back, AJ, in a week or two and see where this has left the team. Who transfers because of this? Does this impact who wants to come back and who doesn't? Does this do anything for recruiting? We may not know that in the short term, but you're right. There's a lot of dominoes that this could really impact. And it's more than just, okay, an assistant coach is gone. It'd be different if Dane had an opportunity to be a head coach somewhere and he took that and everyone was supportive of that. But no, this was just kind of a blatant firing. And it's surprising to see. Dane did release a statement on Twitter saying, quote, "I love IU with every part of my soul and grateful to those that gave me this opportunity. Most importantly, I'm honored to have worked with the players on our team. They dug deep, never gave in, and will forever be remembered for their accomplishments. I became an Indiana Hoosier 25 years ago. I am a Hoosier today, and I'll be a Hoosier tomorrow. Go IU.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the statement from Dane Fife, but I would imagine we'll slowly find out more about this. I mean, it's 2022. Stuff leaks, stuff gets somewhere. Someone's going to talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, all we know are the statements being put out. And it wasn't a beat around the bush statement by Coach Woodson by any means.
Let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with Bet Rivers yet, now's the time, because they're offering a $250 match bonus for our first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one play to turn your money into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With football season kicking off, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the Bet Rivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
We should talk about this team, though. You mentioned it. It's taking the spotlight away from these guys who just finished a 21-win season, got a win in the NCAA tournament. They bow out in the first round. They won their first 4 game. They bow out in the first round to St. Mary's. This is a year that Indiana beat Purdue. They beat Illinois. They beat Michigan. They beat Ohio State, made a run of the Big Ten tournament, won an NCAA tournament game. I think all in all, AJ, you have to be pretty pleased putting this news aside of year one for Indiana and Mike Woodson.
Yeah, I'm this year played out as expected for me. I expected Indiana to fall somewhere in the middle. They fell just below that, but what they had coming back with the uncertainty, with the coaching style, staff adjustment, I thought they had enough talent to compete. The good thing is they competed night in and night out. There was no team that just ramshot over Indiana until the NCAA tournament. And even though they had a schedule that was pretty easy earlier, they competed hard in the Big Ten. And I saw some bright spots. I think the Northwestern thing that happened, it was a wake-up call for a couple of the players, like Xavier Johnson. I think after that situation, I know he had some personal stuff going on. He really turned into the player that people envisioned him being, and that helped Indiana, get a little momentum towards the end of the season, going into the Big Ten tournament. They made a nice run in the tournament, won a couple games more than we have in the last couple of years, beat a couple good teams. And it turns out that tournament game, for those 2 tournament games, they needed both of them to actually get in the play-in game. So, you just never know when it comes to, college basketball. You have to go out there today and win every game. So I'm pleased with the progress. It's just a lot when you finish like that. There's nowhere to go but up. It's hard. People talk about Iowa State and how they went 2-22 last year, and Indiana could have did. I would not want to be 2-22 and go straight to the Sweet 16 the next year. That's just me, because expectations are going to be Sweet 16 or bust for the rest of for the next 3-4 years. Now you can take on that challenge, but first year coaches usually want a nice little slow, methodical build to the top where they can sustain it at the top. And that's what I think Indiana basketball is.
Yeah, I think they've set the foundation. There's certainly a good foundation there now. The monkey of the NCAA tournament is off their backs. But now it's all about consistency. And
right.
I want to talk about the St. Mary's game. Obviously, it was not the way the Indiana fans wanted to end. I think people are quickly, and I did it too after the win over Wyoming. People are quickly to point to the issues with the plane, not being able to fly out till 4 a.m., having to go to the West Coast, which to me feels avoidable if you're the NCAA. Send the first 4 teams anywhere but the West Coast. But nonetheless, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, but is there room at all for excuses for this Indiana team? I mean, 29 points didn't feel like it should have separated those 2 teams, but what was your takeaway? This team is tired. These travel things really took a toll on them, or St. Mary's is just better?
I mean, when it comes down to it, at that moment in time, St. Mary's was the better basketball team. Yes, they were a little bit more rested than Indiana was. They were on their time zone. Indiana had to change time zones to come over, and that is something that's difficult when it comes to playing basketball. Changing time zones is a big deal. But with that being said, man, I think Indiana was surprised at how good St. Mary's really was. You hear St. Mary's, they've always played second fiddle really to Gonzaga out there in the West Coast Conference, and you just never, they're not that good. That team was high octane offensively, very efficient defensively. The speed and velocity with which they were running their offense and their cuts, I knew once they came out and they were knocking down shots, that it was going to be a rough night for Indiana, and because Indiana was going to have to really, really control this tempo if they were, not that St. Mary's plays at a high tempo, but when you're scoring at a high rate, then you're playing, there's a lot more possessions. So that's where Indiana was going to have to struggle, and they just got away from them. So, yeah, I mean, you could put all that into it. And at the end of the day, you lost the game. You didn't really compete in the game, but, but you still, was able to accomplish, one more step towards getting us back to a national prominence.
Even the Wyoming game, I mean, it was a good game for Jordan Geronimo. Trace Jackson Davis had a solid outing, but it was really not a well-played game either.
Right.
And it was a slugfest, and Indiana was able to take advantage of the fact that they had Trace Jackson Davis and the other team did not. But you're happy to get a win in the NCAA tournament, no matter how you can get it. I mean, survive and advance for a reason, and they did that. But they were definitely wiped out in game 2. They're not the only Big Ten team, AJ. They got 9 into the tournament. The conference did. 7 of them are done. Now, part of that is Indiana was a 12 seed. Michigan State was a 7 seed, and they lose to a 2 seed. Ohio State was a 7 seed. They lose to a 2 seed. So it's not like Big Ten teams. I mean, Wisconsin got upset. Illinois, I don't really know if that's an upset. Houston's a very good team, and Iowa got upset. But for the most part, the Big Ten snuck some teams in toward the bottom of the bracket. They all get beat, and people start to freak out. Are you one that is worried about the direction the conference is going? Is there anything the Big Ten can do to better prepare itself for the Big Ten or for the NCAA tournament?
Man, I think the Big Ten being, good all around, really, and the style of play in the Big Ten really wears down Big Ten teams going as the season wears along. Every game is a competitive game. There ain't no 30-point wins, 20-point wins. You're grinding it out at Northwestern, at Penn State, or with these perceived bottom teams. So I think the style of play versus the style of play in the NCAA tournament really has a negative impact on the teams that come out of Big Ten. I think the last team to play in the Final Four in the championship game was Wisconsin back in 2015 with Sam Decker and those guys. And then the last team to win it was my senior year, Michigan State 2000. And the thing that I noticed about that team is that was a team that could play many different styles. So I see their success in the NCAA tournament. They can play bang and rebound. They can be physical, but they also have one of the most up-tempo offenses that you could really find in the Big Ten at that time. So, I think our coaches and our conference are going to have to learn how to play multiple styles once they get into a tournament situation and try to keep up with these teams and speed, velocity, and ability to score. Even you talked about the Wyoming game. It was a boring game. Like it was just like multiple post-ups. It was like the Wyoming guard post up every single possession. Yeah. Trace Jackson and Race and whoever posting up every single said, man, neither one of these teams are going to succeed in the tournament because the adrenaline is there. It gets you going, and you have to match that. You can't sit in the post unless you got Akeem Olajuwon down there. So we're just going to have to adjust our style. We recruit guys that can play multiple styles. But I do believe our conference is the best conference because it allows for the most competitive games throughout the year. Us in the Big 12, I believe, that are most competitive conferences. So I don't think you change anything. You just figure out how to recruit better players. You figure out how to play multiple styles, and you figure out how to navigate through the NCAA tournament and have a plan to navigate through NCAA tournaments.
Well, it's crazy to think that the players need to be better, because the Big Ten arguably has three of the top, maybe four or five of the top 10 players for National Player of the Year. I mean, you're talking about Johnny Davis, Keegan Murray, Kofi Coburn. You've got Jaden Ivey and EJ Liddell have all been tremendous this season. But like you said, a lot of those teams are one-dimensional. I look at Iowa. They can run up and down the floor with you, but can they play a grinded out game?
No,
not really. You look at Wisconsin.
Not a good defensive team individually.
Yeah, no. Can Wisconsin play an up-tempo game? A little bit more this year, but not in the tournament, not with Johnny Davis, not at 100%.
Yep.
Can Illinois run up and down the floor with you? They can, but they get wild, and those guards make some interesting decisions. Can Ohio State run up and down the floor? No, they didn't have the guards this year to do that.
Nope.
Can Michigan State? It just didn't really feel like Michigan State even had an identity this year. They were a weird team to try and figure out. Can Indiana run up and down the floor with you? Absolutely not. We both know that to be the case. The two teams
who has the ability to? The two teams remaining.
Yes. Yep. The two teams remaining. Michigan can pound it inside with Hunter Dickinson and Diabate, but they can also stretch you out. Their guards are playing tremendous right now. They've got everybody back from injury, and their freshmen have developed throughout the year, and they're led by Eli Brooks, who's a veteran guard who knows what he's doing. And if he's making sky hooks, then you can't defend him, and you're not going to beat Michigan. And then you've got Purdue, who can bang it inside with Zach Edey and Travion Williams, but boy, can they shoot the basketball. And Jaden Ivey has just incredible ability to do whatever he wants on the floor at any time. And that's why those two teams still remain. And I think you made this point to me, you've made this point throughout the season. You have to be able to score. And Purdue is one of the best scoring teams in the Big Ten. Now, all season, defense has been a little bit of a liability, but offensively, they can play in so many different ways.
Right. I mean, I think you hit it on the head, man. I've been saying that since, the 2-3 years since we've been doing this podcast.
I think the first episode you might.
Yeah, right. I'm thinking about the team scoring average. I think we average 70 points a game as a team. Like, it's not good enough. You can preach all this defense stuff all you want to. The game has been systematically put together to take defense out of it. Really, you can't be as aggressive anymore. Any hand check is going to be a foul. So you got to get high octane, skilled basketball players who can make shots efficiently, not take shots, make shots efficiently. And that's the difference. We got guys taking shots, but and I've really, in defense of our players, like Miller Kopp and Parker Stewart, they're not getting enough reps. So you have to be Steve Alford efficient to really make an impact on a team like this. You have to be Jay Edwards efficient. And these are anomalies. These are the best shooters in NBA, in Indiana basketball history. So, and those guys aren't there. So all these kids are volume shooters, but those two kids in particular aren't getting their volume because they're not getting enough shots. And then part of it's their fault. They're not running the floor hard, not getting transition threes. They're not getting, threes just out of the half court offense. But when you look at those two teams, like Michigan and Purdue, Michigan is what I see as player development. Like I was shocked by it. Everybody was ready to write them off. They were talking about Juwan Howard. He had his debacle later in the season, but the injuries and all of the talk, it helped those freshmen develop. What's the backup point guard's name?
Frankie Collins.
Frankie Collins, man. I'm like, where'd he come from? Who was this?
How much of that is Phil Martelli, do you think? I think Juwan made an incredible hire there, getting Phil Martelli.
Oh, definitely. I think that it works well together. Juwan knows basketball. Yeah. He can run his own offenses, all that kind of stuff. This is not give Phil Martelli credit. Like I hate when people do that, especially with African-American coaches. They seem to just, it's somebody else doing the job. It's not. He's doing his job. You can see Phil Martelli's system, but you can also see Juwan Howard's imprint and his influence on motivating his basketball players, making them feel loved, letting them play their game within the system. Like Frankie Collins, I saw him do like 3 crossovers in one move, like in one scene. I'm like, most coaches will pull you out for that because you showboat at the end of the day. So, I feel as if they work together. You can see Martelli's imprint. You can see Jawan's imprint. So with Purdue, you have the ability to play fast. The more Martin, the further they'll go. That's my opinion. I'm going to go down with that. I love Zach Edey. I love having that different dynamic, but Zach Edey slows everything down, and he's liability defensively, and good teams after. I'm not saying St. Peter's is not a good team, but I'm not sure they have the size and the depth and the strength to keep up with Purdue. But any team after that, you're going to need a heavy dose of Travion Martin because of the pace of the game that it could potentially be. The only other game that's really slow at starts, usually the national championship game, because everybody's so nervous. The air is so thick, and it makes people nervous in the beginning. Then they get to playing. But, those two teams, Michigan and Purdue, are versatile when it comes to Caleb Houston and the point guard with the concussion. What's his name?
Devontae Jones.
Devontae Jones. Like all of a sudden they got players. Like, where they come from? Like
they've developed. Devontae's great down low. These guys have gotten better and better, and that's because they've been allowed to work through their mistakes. And I think that's a good transition to this Indiana team, where they take the next step. Right. To me and to you, we've talked about this before. They need explosive playmakers. And I think you recruited Tamar Bates to be an explosive playmaker. And he's been one of my biggest issues with this team this year, is that he was not given the chance to grow. He had a good start to the year. His non-conference was good, had a great game against Ohio State. Then he goes through that late January slump. And all of a sudden he is either not playing or playing 2 to 3 minutes in the first half and never touching the floor again. And I get it that you've got experienced guards. You don't want to run with the struggling freshman, but how is the struggling freshman going to get better if you're giving him 2 minutes a game? I'm not saying give him 30, give him 10, give him 8 to 10 minutes. Let him have a couple of spurts in the game where he can get a feel for the game. Throwing him in for 2 minutes, he's going to press. He's not going to have a good understanding of what's going on. His impact isn't going to be there, and he's quickly going to go back to the bench. I just think he is the guy, AJ, that could unlock this team.
I agree. And what the way I look at that situation is, it's like me. I mean, I'm raising a 15-year-old daughter that's about to be 16. And all the men who raise daughters, they can attest to this. Once they get to a certain age, you have to relinquish the reins a little bit to allow them to make the mistakes that they're going to need to make to learn the lessons. Now, you can try to control them and try to keep them in the house, say no every time they want to go somewhere. But what are you going to create? A resentful child. At the end of the day. So they're going to break off and go do whatever they want to do anyway against your wishes. So you have to give them a certain amount of freedom. And that's what I think when I think of Mike Woodson and what he can do next year to open up things a little bit. You got to let the reins go. You got to let these kids be who they came in to be. You cannot rein them in and control them, because they're either going to leave you, we'll get to the portal later, or they're going to be a shell of themselves. And I knew talking to Tamar Bates earlier in the year that this is the type of kid that Indiana needs, but I wasn't sure they were going to allow him to be who he really is. And you have to live with some tough shots that he takes. You have to live with that in order for him to get his rhythm and be who he is. He's not a spot up shooter. And that's what I was essentially trying to make. It's like when all these people play with LeBron James. I saw a joke, is like their superpowers go away. All of a sudden, they can't hoop no more. It's like they just become spot up shooters simply because he's making all the plays for them. So you have to be, you got to let Tamar Bates take a couple of tough shots. You got to empower him and say, hey man, keep shooting. Not let him lose a game. I'm not saying that. You got to get in that film room and say, hey man, this is your opportunity to mix and go get a shot. You missed this right here. This is the lane is open right here. You looking to reverse it. This is your opportunity, because you need that wing that I know Ron Harper Jr. is leaving, but to guard the Ron Harper Jr.'s, to match the Jaden Ivies, to match the Johnny Davises. We don't have that type of player, and we turn it into a spot shooting basketball team. And that's just not going to work in the Big Ten. So I just challenge Mike Mike Woodson and that staff to get players, find players, or, empower the players that they have to be a little looser and allow them to play offense freely. Today's episode of House of Hoosier is sponsored by Honey, the easiest way to save money when shopping on your phone or your computer. Have you ever been in this spot? You're shopping for something online. You get to checkout, and when it asks you for a promo code, you start Googling trying to find a way to save some money. Thanks to Honey, manually searching for coupon codes is a thing of the past. Because Honey is the free tool that scours the internet for you and finds the one that fits your cart. Here's how it works. You're shopping, you check out, the Honey button pops up, you click apply coupons, you wait a few seconds, you watch the price you pay go down. I was shopping the other day. I was at Walmart and I had a big cart of groceries, man. And I thought, man, it's still, I think it came out to $250, man. I clicked on my Honey app and it got me great savings and discounts, man. So I was excited about that. So I knew this was an app that I was going to keep in my phone for the foreseeable future. So if you don't already have Honey, you could be straight up missing out. By getting it, you'll be doing yourself a solid and supporting this show. I never recommend something I don't use. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/March Madness. That's just joinhoney.com/March Madness. Now back to the show.
X was getting to that point late in the year where he was the guy for Indiana that could break down a defender and make something happen. But X his game isn't break you down and he does, but I don't think it's his game, is to break you down and take tough shots. I think if you've got an open spot up three, he's going to take it and he's going to use his speed to get to the basket. But I see Tamar as more of a mid-range guy, as someone who can play at all three levels of the court. And that's what Indiana desperately needs. Do you think that that's more, talking about Mike Woodson and his coaching style, do you see that comparing him to someone like Juwan Howard, who's a little bit younger? Do you see that as a differing style between the two coaches and the way they want to let their players play?
Absolutely. I mean, I saw it last year with Juwan Howard. I've seen it this year with Juwan Howard. I'm watching closely, and I could see, point guard anytime, the point guard brings the ball up the floor and he looks at the coach. You have to, and he's looking for direction. And you want your players to be able to flow into the offense. Okay, you bring it up. We're going to drag a screen right here. When he drags, it's going to be a double on the other side. You already know what's going to happen. You can attack this lane. You got a double coming off on this side. Let's see if we can get something early. You know what I mean? And that's where I want to see next year. I want to see X or whoever the point guard is be able to bring it up and we flow into everything. They call it flow at that level, at the NBA level. Just let it flow. Like we know who's supposed to have the ball, who can do what. Let's let them be who they are. And I love that with Juwan, especially his team last year. They flow. Mike, what's the point guard? Mike Smith was his name?
Yes.
Yeah. Mike,
the transfer from the Ivy League. Yeah.
They didn't run plays for him. It was pick and roll. And he got in the lane. He found open guys. They re-penetrated. They found shooters. And when they missed, Hunter Dickinson was there to tip it in. They threw it into Hunter a little bit. He touched it. He got his numbers. And then, they flowed. You just didn't know where it was going to come from. When you know that we're going to throw the ball to Trace Jackson every single possession, and I'm going to throw it out to you, and you need to make it, or you're not helping. That's unnecessary pressure on a guy. These aren't pros whose job it is to make a three. Like, that's not what this is. These are kids who are learning how to become basketball players. And so then I'm not saying, and I think that's an adjustment Mike Woodson will make. I think that, this year he felt as if he was limited. I didn't feel that way, when I'm on the outside looking in, I think X could do a certain amount of things. Trey Galloway was very creative handling the basketball. I like what he can do with his pass. And if only he could, get in the gym and improve his jump shot. Jordan Geronimo is unafraid. It was some positive things I saw, but I also saw, it's so easy to scout against. Go him, throw it at him, try to force him to his left shoulder, double teaming as he's on the dribble, or double team him on the catch, or force these guys to beat us. They'll get tight if they miss a couple shots. You don't want that. You want guys that know that they can attack at any moment. And those are, you think about the plays that were made against Indiana to beat Indiana. These plays weren't plays that were drawn up. These were kids making plays.
Yep.
And that's what you have to encourage your players to do, is just make plays.
I mean, you surround Trace, just think about the starting lineup. You surround Trace, who's likely to get doubled every time he touches the ball, because you've got Race, who they played a really nice 2-man game together this year. They did, but he's not a threat from the three. I know he made some, but the scouting report says let him shoot. And then X, for the longest time, was not hitting threes. He started to hit them down the stretch of the season, became more reliable, but I mean, all you got to do is look at how Ben Johnson and Minnesota defended Indiana. Mm-hmm. They were like, shoot it. We're going to double Trace every time he touches the ball. Your guards shoot it. Mm-hmm. And Indiana has to surround, whether they play with Trace next year or not, you have to surround him with more than 1 or 2 shooters. It needs to be a 4-shooter lineup. You need to have 4 guys out there who can either make a shot or have the threat of making a shot so that a shot fake works. A Trey Galloway shot fake doesn't work because there's not a threat. He's like a 22% 3-point shooter or whatever it was. Yeah. So you have to be able to not only have shooters, but have guys who can utilize a shot fake because the defense respects the fact that they are or might shoot the basketball. So that to me is the next step, is getting more shooters. You mentioned the transfer portal. I think we should talk about it. The news on Wednesday is that Christian Lander is the first to announce he is entering the transfer portal. The way he wrote it, the way he put it out on social media, did not seem like a guy who will consider coming back to Indiana like he did last year. I don't think this shocks a lot of people, AJ. This has been a tough 2 years for Christian Lander. I don't think there's any way around that. He got some playing time under Archie Miller, but clearly was not ready. Kenya Hunter told us on the podcast that we did with him in the offseason that he was not ready. Mm-hmm. And this year he deals with the injury, doesn't get a ton of minutes. He's third on the depth chart, the point guard position, and so he transfers. I don't think this is a huge surprise, but what's your takeaway from seeing that news?
I mean, I mentioned it on one of the podcasts, is if he doesn't play this year, he's going to transfer. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just what the kids today do. They have the option to do that, and I don't condone it, but I understand it at the end of the day. I could, when you play enough and you've been around long enough, you can watch and see the movements that are within the lineup to determine how somebody feels. And I knew that when Finney was given the green light and all the love from Woodson, that he wasn't happy with Christian Lander. Because there's no way, in my opinion, that a guy like Finney, who may be leaving next year, is going to get all my minutes when I know I'm going to need this guy next year. So that was
talented 5-star who doesn't see the floor.
That was telling to me. I was like, oh no, somebody don't like something. And so he's going to be out of there. So I wish him nothing but the best. I see the ability in him. I don't think Indiana last year or this year is the system for a kid like him. He came out earlier than, most. I know he had his own reasons for doing that. And, it didn't work out 2 years. So he's going to have an opportunity to play somewhere else and show his talent. And I think somebody will take a chance on him because of his youth, because of his lack of playing, and they can groom him the way they want to groom him. So not surprised about that one, not at all. And I'm not surprised he was the first one to come out.
I'll be curious to see where he goes. If he goes to a mid-major and puts up some big numbers there, or if another Power 5 conference team is willing to take a chance on him. I think he bet on himself coming out of high school, and it didn't work. But I don't know if all of that was his fault or not. It just didn't feel like he ever meshed with either one of the coaches that he has played. You make a great point. I mean, Rob Finney had his moments, but it's not like Rob Finney was doing all that much this year to earn all of those minutes that he was getting. So clearly there was some sort of disconnect between Woodson and Lander. So it's not all that surprising that this has happened. We wish him the best of luck. I hope he's in a situation like Al Durham, a situation like Jerome Hunter, who I think got to play a little bit more in the Xavier offense. Hopefully he will find a home where he begins to enjoy the game of basketball again, because that's what we want from all these athletes. This is, when it boils down to it, this is a game, and we want these guys to enjoy their college experience. We don't want this college experience to be a drag, and it's just been a tough 2 years for Christian. So hopefully he will find a good landing spot. But it does open the door, AJ. It starts the dominoes. The first one is down. Now, where does this team go from here? Everybody can come back. We already know that one person is not. Race Thompson and Parker Stewart went through senior day. Other guys that could have gone through senior day, Rob Finney, I believe Michael Durr could have. I believe Xavier Johnson could have. And I also believe that Miller Kopp could have. And none of them did. So to you, what does that mean as you try to forecast the future of who may be coming back and who may be leaving?
All the guys you mentioned just right there, they should come back. I mean, I don't see none of them are high draft picks or high pro prospects and things of that nature. And all four of those guys that you named have a lot more to prove. I think Michael Durr out of that group I think his decision could hinge on what Trace Jackson Davis does, because that's a guy that he's 60, whatever, and he should be playing. He should be playing more minutes somewhere. I know he's limited in what he can do, but he's a guy that can, that held his own in some of the games where he got enough minutes. So I could see him do it, making his decision based on what Trace Jackson does. Finney, I see him leaving.
I do too. I think it could be one of those where he's given it everything he's had here at Indiana. And whether it's been injuries or Xavier coming in, battling with Devontae, his first few years for minutes, I think he's been through a lot. He's given Indiana his moments. You think of the Butler shot. You think of the great defense he played on Cassius Winston to win the Michigan State game. He didn't get Big Shot Bob nickname for nothing. He obviously hit the big shot against Purdue. I'm with you, though. I think he could be a grad transfer that maybe sees greener pastures on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I don't know him. I haven't talked to him, so that's full disclaimer. But I'm just going off just watching body language, listening to what he says. And I can see him finishing his career outside the state of Indiana and just going somewhere and getting a fresh start and a fresh end to his career. He's been injured a lot. That stuff plays a role in it. But the good thing he has on his side is if for whatever reason, Mike Woodson adored him as a backup point guard. So he always has that in his back pocket.
And his decision may hinge on Xavier as well. If Xavier decides to go, all of a sudden Rob Finney could be the starting point guard again. To me, I'm not sure that's great news for the team going forward. I'd like to see X come back, because I think he really started to show there in the second half of the season what he could provide. It's crazy, AJ. The first time he was in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, he was being booed off the court by his own fans. And then they go back and he's playing his best basketball of the season the next time he goes to Gainbridge Fieldhouse in the Big Ten tournament. The way his season kind of turned around, I hope he comes back, because he's got a lot of momentum. I think Race Thompson is a really interesting one, because he went through senior day, which, typically you would think means at the time they're thinking, I see it both ways, that maybe he's thinking, I'm out. I want to get the crowd to wave goodbye. I want to do that whole thing. It could also be that he's thinking, there is a chance that I want to go. And if I do go, I would rather have a senior day than not. Let's say he's 50-50 and they're like, hey, do you want to do a senior day? And he's like, you know what? If I don't come back, I will have regret not having this moment shared with the fan, because it is abundantly clear. Race Thompson loves Indiana. It has shown this year. He showed it on senior day. He loves Indiana. And I wonder if the way he played in the NCAA tournament will change his thoughts at all, AJ. Do you feel like struggling in those last two games could make somebody want to do it again?
No, what I feel about Race Thompson is, and I'm guessing I haven't talked to Race either, full disclaimer that as much as people want him and Trace to be a great pair, they just aren't.
Yeah. No, I think they've been holding each other back.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And I think Race wants to be in a situation, could possibly want to be in a situation where he has a little bit more of a role. He's not just the glue guy. He can, because he has a inside game. He improved his outside shooting, and he might want to go a little closer to home, finish up strong, and do things a little differently. So when a guy goes through senior night, it tells me that he's 60-40 on leaving for sure. Like, you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, I don't think they're a pair. I'd be disappointed if he leaves, but I wouldn't be surprised if he left.
I think it's also important to know, especially for a guy like Trace, who has a decision to make. I don't necessarily think he would transfer, but on a decision to go to the NBA.
Yeah.
Getting to the NCAA tournament was a big deal. It was a big deal for a guy like Trace, who came to Indiana to get back to the NCAA tournament. These guys, Race Thompson goes through his whole career, finally gets to the NCAA tournament. No matter how they played, no matter how it ended, is that the bow on their career? Did they accomplish what they wanted to accomplish? Could be. That could be what they set their goals out to be, was to get this program back to the NCAA tournament. And they say, you know what? In Trace's case, I did what I came here to do. It's time for me to go try the next goal in my life, which is the NBA. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the thought process, but do you feel like, do you agree with that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to Trace, full disclaimers.
Full disclaimer on all these players.
Got to be very clear that this is just my observation, because I read something in one of the news media outlets that he said that his goal was to get Indiana back to the NCAA tournament. He did that. When he said that, it sounded like justification to me. And so when you justify and say, you know what, if I leave here, I did what I came to do.
That's what I'm thinking.
There's nothing left for me to do, really. Are we really going to win national championship next year? Are we really going to be in the Big Ten hunt? Or can I go fulfill my dream of playing in the NBA? My father played NBA. I hear that all the time. I want to go there and be a better player than he was and make my impact there. And with all of the new things that they have for kids, like for me, if you're not a first round draft pick, don't leave early. That's just how I feel. You're a first round draft pick, get out of here. Go immediately. Second round draft pick, no guaranteed money. End up in the G League probably. You get lucky. You end up with a two-way contract. Yeah, that's what you're looking for. So with that being on the table now, it's more enticing to guys, because that's what these agents and these hangers on are telling those guys. Man, at worst, you can make $300,000 being a two-way player, man. You know what? That's way better than going to workouts every day and got books under my arm and going to class and doing papers. You know what I mean? I've done that for 3 years. I'm sure he's probably a guy that can graduate in 3 years. That's just the way Indiana operates. They make sure you get your paper. So I can see him making that decision, but, hopefully, for this and what him leaving would do, it would really put Indiana's coaching staff in a real peculiar position, because it's like, okay, that's the crust of our offense. Now we have to open this thing up.
Yeah, it's like a crossroads.
Yeah, I want Trace to stay, but I'd love to see what they would do if Trace was gone.
I'm with you. It's a crossroads for sure. If Trace decides to leave, it's a moment for the coaching staff to decide, do we want to try and hit the portal and get another big? Do we want to run with Michael Durr at the 5? Or do we want to give Jordan Geronimo and Race Thompson, let's say he comes back, an opportunity to be the front court and spread this thing out a little bit more, put athletes at every position, put shooters at every position, and change the offensive scheme? I think it's I think you call it the right word, a peculiar spot for this coaching staff, because, and I know they've only been here for 1 year. Kenya's been here for 2 years, but that's your guy. That was your offense. That's 19 points a game that is leaving your program. Where do you go from here? Do you try and get another big in the portal, or do you accept the fact that maybe it's time we go smaller? I think that's really interesting. That's the other part of this, AJ, is that likely more than Lander will leave. But then, of course, they can hit the portal as well and try and bring in some talent to Indiana. I know Ball State just had a big who averaged over 13 points per game hit the portal. One of the smaller conferences out east, their leading scorer in the conference just announced he's hitting the portal. Those are the type of guys I think you could get to Indiana. Maybe a mid-major guy who's lighting up the scoreboard and bring in a guy who knows how to score. who plays that type of game. But then again, you got to have a coaching staff that lets you do that. So I'm very curious to see where this team goes from here. Jordan Geronimo hit the transfer portal last year. I don't think Galloway ever did, but Lander did, and obviously he's gone. Thompson did. He came back. It'll be very interesting to see. It's very important to tell fans, you are going to hear people say, I'm going to the portal, but I'm leaving my options open to return to Indiana. I guarantee you at least one player says that.
Definitely.
But last year was a little bit different where everybody did that because they were waiting on the coaching hire. They were waiting to see what they thought of Mike Woodson. Now they know, hey, Mike Woodson is our guy. So I wouldn't be shocked if more guys are just straight to the portal instead of I'm keeping Indiana as an option because they know what Indiana is at this point.
Right. Definitely, man. I think that once again, all these coaches especially the high major coaches, you're in peculiar positions because now it's almost like NBA free agency every year now. Now, you can't build a team through 4 years. And that's what got teams like Wisconsin has done. That's what the teams like Purdue has done. They've surrounded their upperclassmen. They've been able to keep upperclassmen and surround them with underclassmen. So I know they're hoping that, that trickles down and they keep this thing moving forward so they can be older in the tournament. And that's what you want to be. You want to be older. You don't want to have a new roster every year. And that's what it's turning into when it comes to having to dig in the portal to convince yours not to leave and also get in there to convince some of them to come along as well. There's no longer a rush to go get high school freshmen anymore because people's jobs are at stake and they need to win right now. But what it does is it creates an inconsistency, where at the end of the day, you're probably going to be on the hot seat anyway, because now you're bringing in a team that has to really get to know each other once again. So, Mike Woodson and his staff best bet is to take care of home first, is to get the nucleus that they want to get them committed and build around whatever nucleus that is.
Well, you're seeing a lot of the better teams in college basketball, certainly this year, are older. There's not as many, as the great Dickie V would say, diaper dandies out there making huge impacts. Chet Holmgren has obviously been great. Jabari Smith was good for Auburn. Paolo Banchero for Duke. But look at Purdue. I think Purdue's a great example of what Indiana could strive for. There's not a transfer on that roster. That is a Purdue bred roster. That is everybody committed to Purdue and they stayed at Purdue. They're not out there getting grad transfers. They're keeping the seniors, Sasha Stefanovic, the Travion Williams, the Eric Hunters. And then they're bringing in guys who are now sophomores and Mason Gillis and Jaden Ivey and Zach Edey. And then you're getting freshmen like Caleb First. And next year they're going to get Fletcher Lawyer from my high school, Homestead, who's shattered like all of our records this year. They do a great job of recruiting the state, recruiting the area, and then keeping guys there. And I think you also have the luxury of that. If you're Matt Painter, you have some time because no one's rushing you to get out. But if you're someone like Mike Woodson, this is an impatient fan base that wants to see things turned around quickly. So, I mean, in all sense, he did a good job hitting the transfer portal in his first year. He brought in Xavier Johnson, who was a great addition. He brought in Miller Kopp and Parker Stewart, who, for their flaws, helped get this team to the NCAA tournament. But I think, to your point, less transfer portal, the better. If you can keep your nucleus the same and everybody knows the system and things evolve going forward instead of starting anew, there's so much of an advantage to that.
So let me ask you this. So Austin, you do some color commentary or radio for women's basketball?
Yeah, play-by-play for the women's.
Play-by-play for women's basketball. You have a partner?
I don't. I do it all by myself.
You do all by yourself. Okay, so let's take this podcast for example. What if every year we did this podcast, you had a new host?
I'm having to teach him the ropes every time.
So you can't really think about how can we elevate this podcast?
Exactly.
You're gonna think, hey, man, we got to get through this, and I got to teach them how to get through this without messing up. So this is what we do. Let's focus on getting to this point. By the time you get to the point where you can move on, I'm gone. It's another AJ coming here.
See ya.
So this is the same thing that a lot of these college coaches are dealing with. And we talk, and being that a lot of these transfers have the opportunity to play right away in the COVID year, that was an anomaly. Let's hope, because
Yeah.
once you start having these guys sit out 1 year at least, then I think things will fall back into normal. It won't be as hectic as it is. It won't be as many names in the transfer portal as this. So Purdue is a model of consistency.
Yeah.
Wisconsin is a model of consistency.
Yeah.
And so that's where you have to, if you want to be good in the Big Ten, you have to be a model of consistency. Illinois who was the top two teams? Illinois and Wisconsin shared the Big Ten title this year.
Yeah.
Illinois brought back Trent Frazier, Kofi Coburn, Devontae Williams had his 8th year. Coleman Hawkins.
He and Frazier set all the records for like most games played and most minutes played.
So this is consistency. This is why they can go into a Big Ten arena and win a road game, because they're old. They know how the game's going to be called. They know how to defend you. Referees don't call many fouls on veteran players as they do on young players. They let you foul when you have a reputation of being a good defender. So Brad Davidson gets away. I see the complaints all the time. He gets away with it because he's on his 160th game.
Yeah.
He knows all the officials by name, and he can take your best player out by just harassing you and fouling you because they're not going to call it. These are small things, but what I'm saying all that to say is just consistency at the top is why these guys were at the top. And in the middle of the pack, you see the Michigan inconsistent freshmen, young guys. You know what I mean? You see Indiana, all new team basically, except for a couple players that, Parker Stewart, who else was in the middle pack? Penn State. Rutgers was one of the better teams because they had consistency at the guard position.
Mm-hmm.
They had their backcourt back. Great start. And they inserted McConnell. They had Mulcahy.
Yep.
And the only thing they had to replace is Miles Johnson.
And they got Cliff Amore.
Cliff Amore. So,
yep.
Shoot, that's a hell of a trade. So they ended up in the upper echelon. So it's just very plain to see. But what we got to be careful of, we want a consistency in our coaching staff, and we want consistency in our team.
We've already got a little bit of turnover here, but that's a great point on the podcast front, because I can't do anything new if I have to teach somebody the ropes. And so Indiana can't do anything new with its offense if it has to teach people the basics every time they come in. Yep. It's a great comparison. I don't even think you have to look to Purdue. I'm obviously biased. All you got to do is look in the other locker room. The women's team in Indiana is the definition of consistency. Allie Patberg's in her 7th year. Now, 5 of them at Indiana. Grace Berger in her 4th season. Mackenzie Holmes in her 3rd season. Alexa Gulbe in her 4th season. Nicole is a transfer, but this is her 2nd season. Everybody coming back, and that's why they're in the Sweet 16, because they have so much experience, so much veteran leadership. Now they're going to have to retool next year, yes, but in this time where everybody's together as a senior, it's win now mode, and you're going to get those opportunities as winning programs.
I'll say one thing about them: the difficulty that Purdue and all those guys have mastered is the bridge. So now you're that old at the top. Are you bridging the gap between those at the bottom?
And that's the next step, is when you lose your star players, how do you replace them?
Exactly.
Do you go to the transfer portal, or do you go through freshmen? And I think there's going to be a healthy mix, certainly for this women's team going forward. But I think they're the definition of consistency here over the past few years under Terry Moore. Want to give them a shout out as well. They're in action on Saturday, Elite 8 or Sweet 16 for a trip to go to the Elite 8. Against UConn, big bad UConn. So hopefully they get the job done. 2:00 start time on Saturday. AJ, this has been a wild season, and we thought it was just kind of a sleepy off season until about 4:00 on Wednesday, and all of a sudden things started to erupt with the Lander departure and the Fife departure. But I'm sure this won't be the last. Hopefully by the time I get this podcast up, nothing changes. But I know we'll probably be back together here in a couple weeks talking about who stayed and who goes. So there's still a lot to figure out for this team. It's hard to forecast next year because we just don't know who's coming back. But I'd say the groundwork has been laid by getting to the NCAA tournament this year.
Absolutely. I think it was a season those guys should be proud of. I'm repping their shirt today.
Yeah, you are. That's a sweet shirt. For those of you watching on video, he's got a sweet shirt on here.
our job is to, to watch you and talk about them every night. But at the end of the day, man, when you're not being judged by us, we're proud of you. We're happy,
Yep.
for the success of the players. We want each player to make their own decisions, do the right thing for themselves, and move on. Keep the Hoosier family in your mind. But I'm proud of where they were. 21 wins. And birthed in the NCAA tournament, got an NCAA tournament win,
Yep.
And ran into a better basketball team. If I'm Mike Woodson, I'm playing that tape in the weight room. Every the tape of St. Mary's throttling us. Hey, I'm playing that tape in the weight room. While you in the weight room, you watching yourself getting screened, getting beat on back doors, XYZ. So that's just motivations for you guys to come back extremely strong and try to create and create a more better legacy for Indiana basketball moving forward.
Did the guys after you graduated have to watch the Pepperdine film all summer long?
No, they didn't, because Coach Knight got fired.
Oh, that's right. That was right in between there. Yeah. There was a little bit more going on there, certainly.
Exactly, yeah.
I've learned a lot here, getting to be behind the scenes with the women's team about how hard these teams have to work, what all they go through. And so I'm with you. We're not here to judge these guys. We're not here to scrutinize these guys. They've been through a lot. It's a long season. It was all things considered a successful season. But now Mike Woodson's got to go back to work. He's got to find a new assistant coach. He's got to keep these guys here and retool the system for year 2. But I'd say the groundwork is laid for year 1. AJ, good stuff as always, man. We'll catch up here when we know more about next year's team. But I appreciate you hopping on here on a busy news day here for Indiana basketball.
No problem, man. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm sure we'll be back on here next week.
Who's winning the championship? Quickly.
Who's winning that? Arizona.
All right. He's on the Wildcats. I'll take Gonzaga. I think they finally do it this year. But I like Purdue's. I like Purdue's route a lot, though.
Yeah, they can get to the Elite Eight for sure. But the first time I saw Arizona play, I was like, now that looks like an old school college basketball team.
They are so talented. They might be the most talented team in the tournament. They have weapons at every position. That's good.
And shout out to TCU for pushing them to the limit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And a non-call costing them an overtime in a game. So
it's gonna be a tough matchup with Kelvin Sampson and Houston in the Sweet 16 for Arizona. That's a must-watch game.
If they get past that one, they're gonna be national champions.
I like that. I like that idea a lot. Yeah, all right, AJ, good stuff as always. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate you all throughout the season listening and watching us. It's been an absolute blast, and we'll get ready for the 2022 season coming up shortly. AJ, thanks so much, man.
Thank you, man.